This is Jeremy Lafreniere with Capital Jiu Jitsu. I've now achieved the mounted position. Once I achieve the mounted position, I'm clearly in a dominant position. I might want to think about some strikes. When I begin to use strikes, however, my balance isn't what it was when my hands were on the ground. Okay? And so when I lift up to use strikes, he's going to take my balance away. His elbows are going to remain against the ground, but also against my knees. He's going to lift his hips in the air, and now I have no balance, so my hands have to go back to the ground. But my hands will end up closer to his head, allowing him to use his arm to wrap my arm. When he wraps my arm, notice how he grabs behind the tricep. All right, very important that he just doesn't loop his arm through, but he physically grabs the tricep. Also, for safety reasons, this hand will turn under his shoulder. If I leave my hand out and he turns in that direction, I will break my fingers or my wrist. So I turn my shoulder. He traps the bicep on the other side as well. All right, we're going to start that again. So we're here. His elbows are on the ground. They're against my knees. When I lift up to punch, yes, he takes my balance away and wraps up and traps the bicep. Now, the thing is, he wants to keep his hips off the ground until the very last second once he's finished trapping my arms. Then he lowers his hips. He traps my foot on this side. Now I'm like a table, only he's taken away 2 of my legs. When he lifts, I am going to fall. There's nothing else that I can do. Now he's in the guard posture. We talked a little bit about the guard posture at the very beginning. In the guard posture, he wants to keep his hips forward, his head up, and his hands are braced against my rib or my hips, so I can't sit up on him. The other thing that he wants to do here is keep his center of gravity low by sitting his butt on his heels. It's very important. Okay, so back over here in the mounted position. When Stuart escapes the mounted position, he's utilizing one of the basic principles of leverage, and that's taking away a person's balance. When I'm up and I go to strike, yes, he lifts his hips, wraps my arm, traps my bicep, lowers his hips, and traps my foot. He lifts his hips again and takes away my balance completely, achieving a new position. Stuart is still in a slightly disadvantage, or I should say, I still have a slight advantage on him with the guard and my legs wrapped around him. But he's gone from being in a very bad position to being in only a slightly bad position. He's climbed the positional hierarchy, so he's done himself well. That's the end of this discussion. This is Jeremy Lafreniere with Capital Jiu Jitsu. We're now going to get a little bit into the guard posture and how to defend ourselves from strikes when we have the guard posture. Somebody who's in the guard, they will often try to utilize a ground and pound strategy where they're trying to hit me when I have the guard. And if I'm not protecting myself the right way, he actually can do a lot of damage because he has gravity on his side. The thing is, I have my hips on my side. So when he starts to throw those punches, I'm going to use my hips to break him down. When I break him down, notice how I get the inside position. You always want the inside position. So when he starts to throw the punch, my hips break him down and my hands get on the inside of his hands. I'm going to take my right hand, I'm going to put it behind his head, holding the knot, not the neck. The knot right behind the back of his head. And my left hand is going to come underneath his forehead, just like this. I'm also going to climb my legs up over his back, and I'm going to use my elbows against my knees, minimizing his ability to throw strikes. Now, if he starts throwing wild, round strikes, yes, I can still take punishment. So if he starts using that, my knees are going to climb inside of his biceps. If he wants to throw these wild round strikes now, I'm going to weather the storm. You have to remember that in Jiu Jitsu, one of the strategies, the principal foundations of Jiu Jitsu, is letting the person use more energy than you. When I'm here, I have a strong foundation for defending myself against his strikes. And when he's throwing the wild strikes, he's using up all of his energy, exhausting himself. Once he gets tired, the submissions then come easily. Another thing he might try to do is stand up and away from me. If he stands up and away from me, my hand will slide down his forearm, grabbing his wrist. And I want to actually use both hands to grab his wrist. My leg is going to straighten out, locking the knee, and my foot is going to be against his hip. So what this does is, he can't step any farther back because I have his arm. But he can't get any closer to me because my foot is against his hip. I'm going to take 2 shots to the jaw, and then I will stand up in base and get away. So one more time. We have 3 distances when we're defending ourselves from strikes inside the guard. First distance, if he tries to throw, break him down. Get the inside position. I also want to hold behind his head and in front of his head, get a high guard, and use my elbows against my knees. Now, if he starts throwing wild punches, I'm going to use my shins against his biceps. My feet are against his hips. And as he throws those punches, he's exhausting himself. Notice how I just flow with those punches, not giving up my position. Finally, if he decides that he wants to get away from me, I am going to hold his wrist. I'm going to put my foot against his hip, and I'll strike him to the face. If I inflict enough punishment, maybe knocking him out, then I'll stand up in base and get away. That's the end of this discussion. This is Jeremy Lafreniere with Capital Jiu Jitsu. We're now thinking about the guard from the other person's perspective. Now, Stuart wants to escape my guard, and he wants to do it in a way that's going to be effective. So in order for him to escape my guard and achieve a dominant position, he first wants to obtain the inside position with his hands himself. So again, if I am the one who's trying to use my guard, I'm going to try to get the inside position. But since he's trying to escape the guard, he's thinking about using the inside position himself. And there's an easy and simple way to do this. His hands make the prayer position. They climb right up my midsection and out and around my biceps. His elbows are down. His head is down against my chest. From here, in order to loosen me up, he's going to deliver a couple of headbutts. 1, 2. He hops to both feet. Now he delivers a couple of straight strikes. 1, 2. Once I feel those strikes, the next thing that typically happens is I'll give up my guard because I want to use my knees against his hips to push him away. Well, when he feels that, he clamps his knees around mine, essentially trapping me here. I'm preventing him from striking me, but it's giving him the opportunity to pass. His hips thrust forward. He grabs my ankles and pushes them forward. He steps with his left leg once and his right leg twice, obtaining a new position. We call this knee on the belly. And when he gets the knee on the belly, it's as effective as the mounted position and a great position to deliver strikes from. Okay, so he is inside my guard. Now we're thinking about this from Stuart's perspective. What does he want to do? Pass my guard to obtain a true dominant position. How does he do that? His hands climb up and around the biceps. He protects his head. Next, he loosens me up by delivering a couple of headbutts. He jumps to his feet. Now he's going to loosen me up more by delivering some straight punches. When I break my guard to make space, that's when he clamps around my thighs. From here, he shoves his hips forward. He puts his hands around my ankles and presses them forward. Steps once, steps twice, and he has a new position, the knee on belly. From here, it's a dominant position. It's going to make it easy for him to strike or submit me. That's the end of this discussion. This is Jeremy Lafreniere with Capital Jiu Jitsu. Stuart and I have now switched positions. I'm going to talk about some of the common things that will happen if I'm striking my opponent. The opponent will oftentimes try to get away. Now, it's going to be very difficult for him to push me off of him because I'm on top of him. My weight is centered on him. So as he's trying to push me off, you can also see how my hands can reach his face, but his hands cannot reach mine. I have reach on my side. My hips are on top of his right now. So he's going to quickly find that this is not going to work. What will work is him turning away from me. When he turns away from me, though, I want to stick to him. As he goes up to his elbows and his knees, I put my hooks in. Now let's get a different angle here so you can see what I mean when I say put my hooks in. This is the back mount position. We talked in the earliest clip about how this is the king of positions here. My hooks are my feet, and they're wrapped on the inside of his thighs. When I get my feet here and I put my hands under his armpits, grabbing his collar or his shoulders, it makes it very difficult for him to escape this position. If he rolls back up to his knees, you can see how I can stick to him. If he rolls back down, again, the whole time I'm like glue against Stuart. The only thing you want to avoid is crossing your feet. You might think that you can be tighter against your partner if you cross your feet, but there are submission opportunities for him if my feet are crossed. So keep your feet separated and against his thighs. It's very important to use your hooks when you achieve the back mount. That's the end of this discussion. This is Jeremy Lafreniere with Capital Jiu Jitsu. I'm with Stuart, and I want to talk now how you can use the back mount to use one of the most devastating submissions, the rear naked choke. When I'm here and I begin to strike him, again, common response number one is he pushes away from me, but that's not going to work because I can still deliver the strikes because my hips are on top of him. My reach is going to reach him better than his reach reaches me. So you can see how my hand can strike his jaw, and yet he cannot hit me. So the common response number two is he turns away from me. So as I strike, he turns away. Now you have to remember that when he turns and he gets up, you need to put the hooks in. My hands are going to go under the armpits. But he can easily stand up from here. So what I need to do next is splay my hips into his back, his lower back, breaking him down. Now when I say splay those hips, I'm talking about thrusting the hips forward against his lower back. Now that breaks him down. Once he's broken down, now I can use my rear naked choke as a devastating submission opportunity. We're going to change our angle a little bit, though, because it's hard for me to demonstrate how to implement the rear naked choke from the top back mount. Here, as I achieve the sitting back mount, my hand goes around, and my arm, I should say, goes around his neck. You want to try to cut a tight circle so he doesn't capture your arm as it comes around. Exactly. So my hand is going to make a half fist. It's going to cut a tight circle around his neck. I'm going to grab my bicep or my shoulder as high as I can get my hand on my opposite arm. I'm going to comb his hair with my opposite hand, placing my fingers behind his head. Now, a couple things that I want to point out. Once I get here, my elbow needs to be in alignment with his chin. If I'm off to the side a little bit, then it's a trachea choke. And the problem with a trachea choke is it's excruciatingly painful for the person that I'm delivering it to, and it's going to take a long time to make him go unconscious. If my elbow is in alignment with his jaw, with his chin, and I grab and I apply pressure, my forearm and my bicep are cutting off blood supply to his brain. Now it's a carotid artery choke. And after between 4 and 10 seconds, he will be unconscious. And the pain isn't excruciating, it's more like pressure, so he's less likely to fight back against you hard. So just like this. One more time, I come underneath, I grab, I comb, and I take away his blood supply. Actually, I want to mention one final thing. Why do I comb the hair? Because his chin often gets jammed in that space just above my elbow. By combing the hair, I lift his chin up and out, but make sure the fingers go behind the head, and then I take up all the space. Remember, it's not just pulling my arms or pushing his head, it's taking up all the space. I'm filling up my chest, I'm expanding my muscles, I'm bringing my elbows together, I'm also pulling back and pushing forward. By taking up all the space, you're really going to reach those carotid arteries. The blood supply will stop flowing to his brain. He will be unconscious in between 4 and 10 seconds. Then you can get up and get away. The great thing about chokes is that there's no permanent damage. Once he wakes up, he'll have a headache. After an hour or two, he's back to living his normal life. One more time. Here, here, and here. That's it for our techniques today. Remember, as you practice these techniques, to stay safe. The most important thing that you can do is utilize the tapping principle. 2 taps to the body, the mat, or by saying tap, immediately ends our training until we resituate ourselves. Thank you.